Hey guys, Ron here, and as you may or may not know, one of the most prolific communities on the internet are furries. The fandom is literally just a subculture that is interested in anthropomorphic animal characters, whether it be simply enjoying the aesthetic, commissioning art, or dressing up in fursuits. These furry fans, on a basic level, merely enjoy animals that exhibit human-level intelligence, bodies, and facial expressions. So naturally, furries gravitate towards Pokémon. But because of this stigmatized hobby, many fans have begun to antagonize Pokémon designs that are popular among furries. Any character design that is likely to attract the attention of furries is considered fur bait or furry bait. They use it as an insult because they don't want designs to cater to any subculture in order to get popular. They justify their hatred of some Pokémon as wanting designs to be popular on their own merit. But nobody can actually decide which Pokémon are considered fur bait, especially since every Pokémon can be the subject of some kind of furry art. While making this video, I learned that Scolipede is very popular among furry artists. Does that make it furry bait? Yes and no. By definition, anything that attracts furries is fur bait. Foxes, wolves, and dragons are very popular among furries. Does that make those animals fur bait? The problem is that nobody has agreed upon whether or not the intention behind the design makes it bait. That's why in this video, I'm going to split a great deal of Pokemon into multiple categories to help you understand which Pokemon are more likely to be perceived as popular among furries. I'm going to go in order from the Pokemon that most fans consider fur bait to the Pokemon fans least consider fur bait. But first, the secret category. None. This is the idea that in order for a Pokemon to be furry bait, the artists at Game Freak had to purposely design the Pokemon to specifically cater to this niche community of fans. And since the Pokemon Company is very protective of their characters, especially from adult material and themes, there is no reason for Game Freak to want to be associated with this fandom. Therefore, no Pokemon is furry bait according to this idea. But this is not the prevailing thought among fans. A lot of fans can agree on a certain group of Pokemon being fur bait. I like to dub this group, They Knew. Here our Pokemon Game Freak knew would be perceived in a certain way because they're based on more adult themes or designed to mimic some kind of trope or body type that people already think is super attractive in general. Again, Game Freak was probably not thinking of furries when they made these designs, but they definitely knew people would be attracted to them. Starting with extremely feminine Pokemon. There are some Pokemon like Gardevoir and Lilligant that we'll talk about later, but they weren't purposely designed with extremely feminine body parts or themes. They're simply pretty, which some fictional creatures are. But the Pokemon in this subcategory were designed with undertones that make them, let's say, more enticing. Lopunny is literally based on a Playboy bunny and has one of the top 3 most feminine figures in the Pokedex. I'm gonna say it, it was meant to look hot, and bunnies have always been associated with reproduction. It's the furry bait Pokemon. Salazzle was designed with the most feminine figure I've seen on a lizard, because it's literally the leader of a reverse harem of Salandis. Game Freak knew what they were doing. While making this video, I learned Scalies exist, another subgroup of furries who love lizards. This is for them. Hatterene literally mimics the body of a curvy woman on purpose. Why wouldn't Game Freak know people would find it hot? It is bait, considering Hatterene's actual body is inside its hair shell. I don't even have to spell out why Tsarina is here. What am I doing with my life? Roserade is a femme fatale that uses vine whips, Primarina is a beautiful mermaid pop star, Pheromosa is an alien queen with the figure of a fashion model. Even furries don't like Enamorus, but Game Freak definitely tried to make her look seductive. On the flip side, there are super masculine Pokemon Game Freak even explicitly depicts as being attractive and beloved by women. Machamp has the form of a bodybuilder, Incineroar has the physique of a professional wrestler, Buzzwole is swole, and Urshifu exemplifies the body of a martial artist. They are inspired by peak physical male forms. Game Freak knows that this body type is considered attractive since the beginning of time. Therefore, it is furry bait. Then you have Pokemon based on attractive tropes and origins. Inteleon is depicted as a suave spy. Pokemon are even attracted to it in the anime. The whole butler and maid trope is older than all of us. They didn't have to give Indeedee this caboose, but they did. They knew. Aromatisse is based on a can-can dancer. It's borderline burlesque. I can't even show you pictures of that. What's funny is that Game Freak thought this would look attractive. They designed it to bait us, but nobody took it. Not even the furries claim Aromatisse. But then we got the foxes. Vixens have always represented attractive women. Combine that with the magical girl trope that all Japanese artists know about, and you have this cute anime fox witch that was intentionally made to be pretty. And how can I forget Zoroark? I didn't. It's based on the Kitsune myths, where foxes would transform into beautiful women. It's got a very humanoid figure and makeup-like markings reminiscent of a Kitsune mask. It's very popular among furries, and given its origin, Game Freak knew. And finally, you have the fursuit subcategory. If these Pokemon were designed in Generation 1 or 2, I'd give Game Freak a pass, cause back then they didn't even know about furries. I don't even think they existed. But these Gen 7 and 8 Pokemon explicitly have the proportions of a fursuit. Obstagoon is even based on rock stars. Everybody knows that they have groupies who lust over them. And do I have to explain Sneasler? Furries eat this up. And those are all Pokemon I believe Game Freak designed with the forethought that fans of anthropomorphic animals would be somewhat attracted towards these designs. The definition of furbait. But you may notice some obvious Pokemon are missing. They may be in the next category, titled Game Freak Shoulda Known. These are Pokemon that Game Freak did not design to look sexy. Their unfortunate attractiveness was an afterthought, but it's clear why the following Pokemon are popular among furries and even regular Pokemon fans. These are gateway furbaits. While most fans would consider the Pokemon from the previous category to actually be furbaits, I'd say only around 40% would considering the following bait. But actual furries would consider all of these furbaits since they are super popular in the fandom. Lucario is like the definition of a furry. It's an anthropomorphic jackal, the most upright standing canine in the series, a super popular Pokemon and the most popular in the furry community. But Game Freak did not design it to be attractive. All of its human-like elements are inspired by Anubis, and I would be surprised if there were any ancient Egyptian furries. Actually, scratch that. But regardless, it has baited the furries. The only reason they should have known people would be attracted to it is that it's supposed to mimic shonen protagonists, and tons of women are fans of Naruto and Goku, I'm sure. Cinderace is incredibly popular among furries. It is furbait, but not intentionally. It's designed as a mascot and football player. The themes add up to be completely innocent. After all, sports and mascots are very normal in Japanese pop culture. It's nothing odd. The only difference is that, like I said before, they know what rabbits are associated with. Lilligant was an innocent design, nothing wrong, but when you design anything in the shape of a woman, it's going to be perceived in a certain light. That's why Alchemy is also popular amongst certain communities. Florges is based on sirens. The whole point is that they're alluring. I understand Gothitelle represents goth and gothic Lolita fashion. It had to look like this, so Game Freak isn't at fault, but it's practically a human. Meloetta is a pop star. She was designed to be fawned over in a socially acceptable way, but obviously people online will take anything to the extreme. That's why Gardevoir is the most popular feminine Pokemon. There is nothing on its body that I think is a little bit sus. It's pretty tame. It's a guardian angel knight. It just so happens to be incredibly pretty and as tall as an adult woman, so the rest is history. It's not even furbait, it's just a cartoon fairy. It's barely an animal. And last I checked, something has to be based on a wild or domesticated animal for it to be a furry. Nobody is attracted to it because it's an animal. They like it because it looks like a pretty lady. So Pokemon like Gardevoir and the previous few blur the line. They don't even have extremely feminine bodies. They're pretty amorphous, but they're based on beautiful women. They're gonna unfortunately be attractive to people from multiple communities, like anime fans, not just furries. So you decide if that is considered furbait. Nidoqueen and Miltank, on the other hand, have very clear, mammaries. They are furbait, unintentionally. Since you know all cows have udders, Game Freak didn't invent udders. Jinx has a breastplate, but no furry following, so it literally isn't furbait. You gotta show results to be furbait. How does Loxton do this? Bipedal Pokemon are very popular among the community of furries. This is where the line really is blurred. Some of these are simply animals that stand up, while others are very humanoid. This category is what all the fuss is about. While all the Pokemon we mentioned so far have clear reasons for being popular among furries, the following garners suspicion from those who are very critical of furries. Almost like they're questioning the loyalty of these Pokemon. There are a bunch of Pokemon in this category that aren't even the subject of much furry fan art. Grimmsnarl, Audino, Electivire, Golduck, Hypno, Magearna, and Alakazam are literally not furbait because furries don't gravitate towards them. I'm sure some do, but this proves that simply being bipedal doesn't make a Pokemon furbait. Even being a primate or human-inspired doesn't make something furbait either. Mr. Mime, Sock and Throw, Hitmonchan, Slacking, Conkeldurr, Simipour, Passimian, Oranguru, and Hariyama are not the subject of furry art, despite being fairly humanoid. They are not furbait. They were not designed to be attractive, and most furries don't find them attractive. Starters are the most susceptible for being labeled as furbait, especially in recent generations now that they're mostly bipedal. People are going to be more sensitive to the humanoid aspects of a Pokemon that they raised and became best friends with, and furries are going to become more attached to the anthro animals that they became buddies with. But again, just the fact that they stand up doesn't make them literal furbait. Feraligatr, Infernape, Emboar, and Decidueye, despite being called furbait by some, are not particularly huge in the furry community, compared to other starters at least. We'll talk about him soon, but Infernape is literally a monkey. He looks like a monkey. There's no bait, unless you're attracted to real-world monkeys. The only difference is his intelligent personality, but all Pokemon display this. Decidueye has the body of a stilt owl. They look exactly like this. If anything, the furry art of Decidueye that you can find online usually changes the shape of this Pokemon's body, while they don't always do that to Lucario, for example. But there are a bunch of bipedal and humanoid Pokemon that do have a following, so whether or not they are furbait all comes down to whether or not intention makes something bait. There are some Pokemon that were designed without any kind of intention to make them attractive, but a physical trait of their design makes furries notice them. Nidoking, Chestnut, Mega Swampert, and Rillaboom have pecs. They are monstrous, and some like that. But again, does that make any strong-looking design furry bait? To some it does, but Rillaboom literally has the body of a cartoon gorilla. Is Donkey Kong furry bait now? If you think Rillaboom is, then sure. Mewtwo, Medicham, Leavanny, Mienshao, and Goodra have noticeable thighs. Goodra is actually one of the most popular Pokemon in the furry community, and many average fans know this and would consider Goodra undeniably yet unintentionally furbait. It fills many niches. Deoxys and Blaziken, one of the most popular Pokemon in the furry community, were confirmed to have been designed to be intimidating and not attractive at all, yet their legs and human proportions make them furbait to some. And Greninja's here too. Starters really make people down bad. But a lot of times, even when nothing about the body is particularly humanoid, bipedal Pokemon are deemed furbait for having very human-like personalities, and sometimes personality makes something more attractive than appearance. Whether they be cool, brave, dominant, or bad, these Pokemon have a following for showcasing a personality that people often find attractive in humans. And considering these are intelligent beings who stand up, furries will swoon over a Sceptile or Toxtricity. Okay, honestly, I get it when it comes to Toxtricity. He's fairly humanoid. But Sceptile? I guess fans really like Grovyle and its personality, so Sceptile gets some of that love by extension. But some fans really think Sceptile is furbait, but won't see Garchomp as furbait, despite it literally being one of the most popular Pokemon among adult artists. In fact, don't ask me why, but all the Pokemon you see here are huge in the furry community, and by definition, have baited furries. This perfectly showcases how loose the term is, cause Noivern, a literal wyvern, is rarely considered furbait despite being huge in the furry fandom, while Grumpig hasn't baited furries despite being pretty much an anthro animal. Is this because Grumpig isn't a fairly popular design? Does that mean that any bipedal Pokemon with a good design will be deemed as furbait? These are the questions. But now we're done with the Pokemon that blur the line. We're about to get deep into the iceberg. Here are the categories that only the most degenerate fans consider furbait. The first is all bipedal Pokemon. Some twisted fellows consider Cacturne, Toxicroak, and Haxorus furbait. They aren't, at least according to my calculations. Then we have the most controversial type of Pokemon, some of which are considered furbait. Those are alluring Pokemon, beautiful and handsome Pokemon that are not bipedal, but are popular within the furry community. These are Pokemon that look like animals. They are simply beautiful creatures, but with personalities, and in the end, that's what makes people attached to them. The Pokemon you see here exude feminine beauty, but in no way have any human attributes. They are as much furbait as a beautiful bird or a magnificent tiger. On the flip side, you have handsome Pokemon, none of which have the musculature of a human male, but showcase masculine energy, like a handsome lion. You know some seemingly normie girls are very into Simba, right? And we all know Nala was an awakening for many. These are gateway furbaits. Even though most would not call Samurott furbait, it is very popular among furries. But then you have the most destructive kind, the neutral ones. Some evolutions and Absol, despite being completely zoomorphic, are huge among furries, but that may just be a meme honestly. But fans do consider Absol and Vaporeon, with their short snouts and general beauty, to blur the lines considering they're very well designed. They were made to look majestic, and Absol in particular is designed after a mythical human-faced beast, so people grow particularly fond of Absol. I mean, its mega is pretty much a guardian angel, like Gardevoir. The whole point of this category is that these beautiful creatures are anthropomorphized by fans, not the designers, and therefore seen as furbait. Once again, I gotta use the analogy that famous fictional creatures like dragons and unicorns are translated into fursonas, but are not considered furbait, while these fictional creatures are for some reason. But then again, anything can be turned into a racy piece of art. I mean, it's an entire rule on the internet. That's why the final category exists. Every Pokemon is furbait. There is furry art of every Pokemon, and many Pokemon have been turned into fursuits and more, despite not being considered furbait by the average fan. But when everything is furbait, nothing is. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. If you somehow enjoyed this video, leave a like and subscribe. Go check out my other videos on the Pokemon community and possibly my art videos where I make a ton of fake mon. Check the description for the music I used, the t-shirts I made for you guys, and my Patreon where you can get cool rewards like seeing my videos days early. You can also get rewards by clicking the join button to become a member. Follow me on Twitter so you can see behind the scenes of my art as well.